Suddenly, there was the thunder of a powerful engine only inches from his rear bumper, and the side mirrors, close-set headlights blazed. He felt a jolt, and the bike went crazy. The front pushed out of line and swerved wildly. Rick fought the handlebars and grabbed more throttle. Speed would help straighten him out. He risked a fast glance behind him. It was that Datsun he'd seen earlier, the glass pack exhaust roaring, and the two guys inside were grinning. Grinning, damn it. He heard a crunch from the rear fender, but no shock. They must have dropped back before they hit the tire. For a moment, the rear fender made dangerous noises. It was obviously cutting into the rubber. Then there was a backward jerk from the rear, and the noise stopped. Rick realized with a sense of relief that the end of the fender had folded under. At least it was off the tire. Rick abandoned any ideas that this was just random road rage. The fact that he'd spotted them before meant these morons were clearly out to get him. He kicked down 2 gears and the engine screamed in protest. BMWs weren't really made for speed, but now Rick was thankful that they were very well designed for stability and durability. For a moment, he drew away from the sports car as the speedometer needle crept upward. He crouched down over the tank, continued to nail the throttle to the stop, and kicked back up to top gear. He was coming up fast on 2 cars driving side by side, blocking both lanes. Rick split between them like they were standing still and smashed the side mirror of the car on the right with the end of his handlebar. Let's see the Datsun do that, he thought. The Datsun swerved right, passing the cars on the gravel verge, then smoked the tires as it fought its way back onto the parkway and straddled the center line, catching up once again. Rick shot a quick glance to his right. Too damn steep. He'd never make it. Without conscious thought, he locked his legs around the gas tank and whipped the bike down in as hard a left turn as he'd ever taken. Time seemed to slow. Rick could feel the front tire bucking and slipping as he slammed across the grass median. Thankfully, the ground was still iron hard from last week's hard freeze, or the front end would have rammed into mud and he would have flipped over for sure. Behind him, the Datsun's tires screeched as the driver slammed on the brakes and the sports car spun on the slick concrete. Rick could see a car coming fast from the opposite direction, but it looked like he would get across the road in front of it, so he concentrated on trying to make out what was on the other side of the road. At first, it was just a solid wall of trees and bushes. There, a hole in the wall, some kind of path. He went airborne for a few feet when he hit the curb of the southbound lanes, but he held the bike in alignment by shifting his weight with his butt, and as soon as he hit concrete again, he began struggling to turn toward that tiny, empty space in the trees. The BMW's inertia was immense, and he had to use all the strength in his shoulders and arms to muscle it out of what was a clear intention to shoot straight into an enormous tree trunk. He backed off the throttle, but was afraid he'd lose control if he hit the brakes, so he slammed down through the gears instead. Time accelerated as he ripped across onto the gravel, and then the grass. The oncoming driver flashed by his rear bumper, and he saw a streak of red zip just behind him on his right, and heard a car horn voice fear and anger. He'd forgotten all about the oncoming car, but luckily, he had been right about who would get there first. For a long, terrifying second, he thought the bike would miss the path. Then his front wheel shot upward as the bike hit the clear slope. He threw his weight forward over the gas tank to keep the front down, and trees began whipping past. Still belly down to the tank and peering just over the handlebars, he realized it must really be a footpath because he hadn't hit a tree yet. A lot of branches, but not a tree. Not yet. Now he could use the rear brake, feathering it just on the edge of breaking into a skid. He fought to bring the heavy bike under control, which was a relative term. The BMW was never designed to be a dirt bike, and he stood up on the foot pegs as it bucked and banged beneath him. He kicked through neutral to first gear and gave it some gas. The rear wheel threw up a fountain of dirt and leaves as he began to surge up the slope. A log across his path almost took him down, but he managed to bounce the front wheel up and power the rear wheel over it. A final screen of bushes tore at his arms, and he was clear, alone, in an open field. He skidded to a stop and carefully put down the kickstand. Slowly, he swung off and turned around. The woods were dark and silent behind him. No headlights following him up through the trees. Around him was the quiet, carefully tended expanses of grass and rows of small, dignified white headstones of a military cemetery.